I'm here talking with Karl Faase, and we're in Mudgee.
Yep.
Now, the last time we were together, you were driving out on a road like this out of Burke, right?
We were.
And this was not really cut out for going on Aring Road, etc., was it?
No, just about. In fact, it jumped out of gear around one of the corners with all the corrugations.
I thought it was Jane that jumped out. And,
she's probably ready to.
You were producing this series, Faith Runs Deep, and
Yep.
we were gathering some stories from our section of the world in Burke. What did you have in mind when you first began this idea? I mean, that's a great name, Faith Runs Deep.
Yep.
What's behind that?
Interesting, the name comes from an article that Clive Hamilton wrote, and it was about being PC back in 2015. And it says he was chatting about PC and some of the things we're jettisoning, and he basically said, like, as someone who's not a Christian, we're going to be very...
Is he an economist, is that right?
No, Clive Hamilton's more like an ethicist, and he runs a city ethics centre in Sydney. But he basically said we should be very careful of jettisoning faith, because I think it runs deep in our culture. And it's that became a nice phrase for what we want to achieve, because there is this notion that faith is being moved more and more to the margins, that we're a godless nation from the beginning. We've always been a secular nation, and we should treat religion as this thing that's on the edges. And yet, a reasonable, fair look at our history would see that faith actually runs deep through all parts of our nation from the beginning. And any growth in a anti-Christian or secular idea of Australia is actually a very recent part of history. So understanding that story should change how people view both our nation and faith.
I heard Professor Edwin Judge from Macquarie University say we need to introduce Australians to the master they ignorantly serve.
Yes.
Is that
Look, I think so. I mean, one of the comments out of this series is Roy Williams, who's written a book called Post-God Nation ? And Roy Williams in the series says this country was built on Christian capital, which is the same thing as Edward Judge is saying. And it's not because Christians are coming at history and sort of imposing a kind of Christian faith on it. It's actually looking at our story.
Our DNA.
Our DNA. And going, you know what? That's always been a part of who we are.
So you've done this epic trip in the...
In the ute, yes.
Dragged your poor wife all over the countryside. You've done what, 18,000
18,000 kilometres, yeah.
So where did you go?
Well, we didn't, it's funny, 18,000 kilometres, and there's still lots of places we didn't go, but we went north as far as Kingaroy, so we didn't go too far north in Queensland, down the east coast, all the way down to Hobart on the Spirit of Tasmania.
Dodging COVID all the way.
Oh yeah, because we started and we had to go home, and we started again. Out of Tasmania into South Australia, Barossa Valley, Port Augusta, Ceduna, Nullarbor Roadhouse, and then back through Broken Hills, and then into Western New South Wales. So we were in Western New South Wales with you up in Burke, and then we went back and did some areas like Armidale and Tamworth and those areas as well. So there's a lot of travelling.
Now these people you've met, I think you said you've done 46
Yep,
interviews?
46 interviews, yeah.
So how's it changed you, listening to all these stories?
Oh, look, there's a whole bunch of the information which has just opened my mind and eyes up to the deep influence that some of these people had. And it's a bit like, we talked about the John Flynn story. And it's not because he was the smartest guy in the room. It was not because he was, these brilliant people. What I've been encouraged and challenged by is just average people that had a go. Average people who believed that Jesus changes people's lives and that we should do the same. And that our nation is actually being deeply influenced by those people. That is a fabulous story.
So of all the stories you've heard, can you pick one that's really impacted on you?
Oh, look, I think that the W.G. Spence story, the guy who grows up in the Wimmera area of Victoria, who believes, is a Sunday school superintendent, who is a lay preacher.
So we're talking when?
So W.G. Spence was kind of the end of the 19th century, and mid to end 19th century, but he believed that unions, because that's not a populist idea now, but then unions could support people during the week. And as you told me, the church supports people on a Sunday, But the unions can support people during the week. Starts the miners' union, starts the shearers' union, starts the AWU, pivotal in the beginning of the Labor Party. That is kind of just opened my mind, my eyes to a whole part of Australia's history, the unions and the Labor Party, and again, Steve Chavora was saying the same thing, and Roy Williams, that some of the key leaders of the Labor movement were Protestant Christians. And that, I think that's lost to our history.
So you've designed this so that it's a tool that people can use to bring people out there who know nothing about religion, or they don't want to know anything about religion or Christianity. How do you think this is going to affect them?
Look, this is a gospel. This has got the message of Jesus all the way through it. Not because I stand up and give that message, but because people tell their stories, and in telling their stories, they give the message of Jesus. Tony Huang, he says, what do I need to do? And he said, the guy says to me, you're separated from God and sin separates you. And Tony is a drug dealer in Cabramatta who came to faith in a remarkable way on the streets of Cabramatta. And those stories just multiply on themselves. Artists who came to faith in jails in London. A bull rider who came to faith at a rodeo that was a special international rodeo that was down in Melbourne. You know, all these different parts of life. And I would hope people would go, wow, you know, as somebody in the series says, you know, if that can happen to them, it can happen to me. And hopefully it will change faith from this out there on the edge for...
abstract.
To here's a concrete story of real people radically changed. And we just want so many people to hear it, be encouraged and be challenged by the content.
So there's a book that goes with this, as well as the video series.
Yeah. So the video series and the book, there's a study guide, but there's also a book called The Anthology, which just means a gathering of stories. And they're just 24 stories which tell the whole of somebody's story in a nice, relatively short package. So there's 24 stories, most of which people don't know, and most of which people will be encouraged by.
And so anybody can come watch this?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And
sorry, finish.
I was just going to say, you can actually go to our website, olivetreemedia.com.au, and there's a Watch Plus. So you can watch it by streaming it onto your computer. You don't have to just go out and buy a DVD or anything.
Karl, I've got this theory that it's like those dot paintings you used to look at and, you know, you stare at them and finally an image comes out of it, that if we tell enough of these stories, the face of Jesus will start to come out. Do you think?
Absolutely. And I think what will happen is the face of Jesus will come out of our history, of our nation, which I think most people listening to, who don't have that idea, would think is the most bizarre thing they've ever heard. And yet, God's fingerprints are all over our nation.
Karl, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Good work.